haven't seen you in a while. I did see you actually, but then we didn't have a chance to speak.
Correct.
Have we met?
No.
I didn't. And what is your name?
Tajnura Aviva.
Tajnura Aviva?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty. Nice.
Thank you.
Nice. I remember you. I didn't remember your name, but
Jane.
Jane. Oh, glad to see you back again. Thank you and for being here, and Catherine, thank you for being here. And I don't know the people in the back. I don't know yet.
My name is Leah Ehrlich from
Leah.
Fort Collins.
From Fort Collins. Oh, well.
Joel Ehrlich.
Ah, the Ehrlichs from Fort Collins.
Another country.
They got lost, but they came on time. So.
Thank you so much.
Andrew, good to see you. And have we met?
I don't think we have.
Yeah?
That's
We started.
Oh, I did see you one time, that when I first got here, but you were just sort of
In passing.
Yeah, that's it.
You need a chair, dear.
Okay.
Somehow I was guessing that's
My friend Gideon is here. Thank you. So good to see you. We just met again upstairs. And
Yeah, I'm Sandy.
Sandy.
I am so glad to be here. I was in Florida and I was supposed to be there for 2 more weeks, but I just had to come for your class.
She does all those big, beautiful banners at the Ohala and everywhere else.
That's Sandy.
She's the one.
Yes, she's the one.
Oh,
All Kabbalistic and wonderful.
wonderful. Yes.
I hope so.
I'm glad to, well, I hate to take you from Florida, but I'm really glad to have you here. And Kim, it's good to see you. And it's Edie, or
Edie.
Edie. And Meira. Okay, well, and Marilyn. Let me get, it's Nora?
Tajnura.
Tajnura, okay. Well, Shalom Aleichem. I want to start with I'd like to start with a little nigun, and then we'll try to reconnect to where we were holding 2 weeks ago. There's, let's see, there's a musician in Israel, in Yerushalayim, named Chaim David. You ever know him? So he sings a lot of Shlomo nigunim, but he also made a lot, has caught a lot of nigunim of his own coming down. He has one that he set to the words. I forgot to say Shalom Aleichem to Michael. And so he said one. He has one that he caught for the words Aye Makom Kevodo. Aye Makom Kevodo. Where is the place of the kavod? So since we're working on the story, or at least beginning with the story about the lost princess, and the lost princess, one way is sometimes referred to as the kavod, kavod bat melech pnima, as part of the verse. The kavod of the princess is innerness, is deep innerness, and that's the way the subject of the story. So where is that kavod? Aye makom kavodo, and he said a little melody to it like this. If I can get it. Aye, 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 makom kavodo. Aye, 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 makom kevodo. try the first part again. Aye, 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 makom kivodo. Aye, 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 makom kivodo. Next part is na 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 na. Is this still the same part? Na 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 na. Let's try that. Na 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 So that's what the story is about. And Reb Nahman is telling us that it's maybe the most important question that we could ask is where is that hidden holiness to be found? And in the story that we started to talk about the last session, we got a certain insight into the fact that the question is rooted in the very nature of existence itself. To say that by the nature of this world being here, what is ultimate or what is most real has to be concealed, at least to a certain extent. And that's the theme of the later Kabbalah, which talks about the issue of tzimtzum, that there has to be some kind of contraction of the pure divinity itself, of that which is ultimately real and most real, in order to make room for everything that it can appear as, which includes us. And so we are sort of a hidden dimension, a hidden manifestation of what is true and what is most deep. And the myth, of course, the myth that this tale is set in, it's very much like the myth of the Vedanta tradition, let's say, because in Vedanta you have the sense that God plays in the world, plays roles, and in playing the roles gets attached to those roles and then doesn't recall that it is truly divine. And so the way this myth is cast in our tradition and in the way that Reb Nachman is telling the story is that somehow we come from the same place that this lost princess comes from, where the lost princess represents that part of the divine which has gone into concealment or into hiding. And we come from the same place, so that when we come into this world, if we're like the character in the story who is called the second in command, Sheni L'Malchut, I think is the term that he uses, the second in command, then we have this memory somehow from our origin, from before we enter into this world. We have this memory of the wholeness of divinity, of God as a whole. And that's the first part of the story, which talks about the king playing with the Bat Melech, loved to be mishasheh, so to playing, sort of rejoicing in the state of joy and representing the condition of wholeness of divinity. But the problem with the wholeness of divinity is it doesn't leave any space for us to come into the picture, for worlds to exist. And for that to happen, there has to be some kind of self-contraction, which is what is called Tzimtzum in Kabbalah, and that's represented by the king expelling his beloved daughter, which is, of course, the lost princess. And then the king is in the state of remorse, really, the state of regret, because divinity is not whole. And we who are the embodiment, who are embodied with holy souls, which come also emanate originally from that place of divine wholeness, have a memory that goes back before time started, before the world started. So we're here with this sense that we have something to do here, and we're trying to figure out what it is, basically. And so, and that's represented in the story by the fact that the Sheni L'Malchut is awake to the degree that he knows he has to look for something in this world. And he starts out, he's really looking for it because he has a very special kind of a heart. This is the heart, that Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote about the nature of a prophetic consciousness. And he said basically that what makes somebody a prophet, what's the difference between a prophet and an ordinary person? A prophet knows what God is feeling. The prophet has the divine pathos. So we, ordinary people in this world, we are indifferent to a lot of things that are happening because we don't have the prophetic heart. But if the heart would really be open, the heart of the prophetic heart can feel what God is feeling. And God is feeling that something is missing. And as long as the princess is concealed, as long as the princess is hidden, then wherever things aren't right, wherever things aren't really revealing the divine nature of all that exists, then in the Jewish tradition we're saying that God is suffering. but there's a tsar lo, that there's a divine passion, a pathos, and so the awakened soul, the one who has the awakened heart, is the one who can feel how God is feeling in the world. And so that person becomes devoted, becomes a devotee who is looking for what really would soothe the divine heart, and what will restore God to this state of sha'ashua that exists when divinity is whole, when all aspects of the divine are aligned and interconnected. So he represented as a he in this story, of course, doesn't have to be a he. This awakened soul, the person with the awakened soul, even though they have the awakened soul, leads the person to make the journey, to enter into this world in quest of restoring the lost princess to the source, to the father, to the king, represented as the king, but really doesn't know how to do the job initially. Come into the world, really don't know how to do it. So there's a long process of experience where one is trying to find clues, even how I can fulfill my mission in this world, which may not even be clear initially, just what is it that I'm doing here, but there's something that Reb Nahman seems to tell us, that there's something like a primordial memory that we have. And of course that's the Midrash, and in the Greek tradition have this same sort of idea that there is the Torah that we knew before we come into the world, that we actually had the entire Torah come into the world, and it's not, you can't access it, you know. So it's you have to be you have to remember something. So you have a sense in this world that whenever you see something that's a clue, meaning that it is awakening us to the real reason why we're here, it feels like a deja vu. So there's sort of like a little deja vu, like I recognize this, yes, this is familiar to me somehow, you know, it may be more or less familiar, but you have a sense whenever you see something really, really true, that it reminds you of what you already knew. So the first part of the story, the Sheni L'Malchut is going all over, trying to find out how to look even, and in the part that we did in the last session, it dealt with two special tests that the Sheni L'Malchut had to deal with. At a certain point, a person seems to find their way. They find a path that leads to something, or at least they can believe it leads to something. And in fact, in the story, when the seeker finds this path that leads to an encounter with the princess, but so a kind of a vision, he can remember. He knows who she is when he sees her. He knows who she is. She knows who he is. But that's about as far as he can go. He can't really restore her, but he knows where to find her. But she's in a place that's called the not good place. He can't really get her out of there, but he can find her there. He can find her in a place that is dominated by all kinds of cravings and desires, and he can see that the princess is there, but he doesn't really know how to get her out. Now, the inyan, how to get the princess out of there, and that motif in this story has to do with what is called raising the sparks. That if he really were more evolved, there is a way that ultimately where if a person would be developed enough, then they could find the princess everywhere, even in those places that are considered the not good places, and they would be able to released a spark from that place, meaning that they could transform the energy of whatever they were coming into contact with. But at the earliest stage, he's not able to do that. So he's able to see that she's there, but he's not able to transform yet because he didn't do any sadhana. He didn't do any avodah yet. He doesn't have a practice yet, so he's not stabilized enough, doesn't have a clear enough state. And this is going to be one of the really important themes, is that stabilization, like how do you get stabilized, how do you get solid enough in some place that you could actually do more than just, say, have a concept of what things mean or what things might mean, but how could you actually be effective in some way? And it doesn't have that initially in the beginning of the story, but he has enough devotion that he can receive a teaching, he can hear something, and he's ready to start practicing. And so she gives him a practice to do for a year. So go and sit and fast and meditate, and actually the way she gives the instruction, which is key to Reb Nahman, because Reb Nahman is a great teacher of the open heart, and not just of let's say awakeness alone, but the quality of the prophetic heart, the heart that is feeling the divine, what God is feeling. So she gives him basically a heart practice, namely, what you should do is long for me. So really cultivate your sense of desire to find me, and really feel your longing and what it feels like to be in that state of separation. And it's kind of an ascetic. The first part of the path. This is a kind of an ascetic path. So it's represented by, she says, like, you got to do this for a whole year, and then on the last day, this is going to be the crucial thing, is you have to be sure to fast. And but he isn't able to do it because he sees this beautiful apple. And
What can you do?
it looks looks too good, So even though it had practiced for a whole year and cultivated longing and some kind of stability in his practice, nevertheless cannot resist this desire that arises, and because he can't resist that desire, he can't really free the princess. So it looks like he failed the first test, although from another point of view, he practiced a certain stage, and he still can find her in the same place. So he hasn't really transformed anything yet, and he hasn't even necessarily done that any harm, because she's still in the same place basically, and he can find her and he can get another teaching from her. And she says, okay, that was all right for the first practice. You had to go through the purification, make this kind of effort. Now, just go back for another year to your place in practice, but you'll be able to eat this time. The only thing is, on the last day of the year of your practice, stay awake. Stay awake. The key is really staying awake. So he practices and practices for the year. Comes to the last day, and he sees on his way to the practice space, or somewhere near there, he sees this stream that has some fluid in it that looks red, and which captures his attention. He's drawn over there, and he notices not only does it look red, but it smells like wine. And so he starts thinking about that. This is very odd, that to have a stream that looks like red and it smells like wine. And what does he do? He tastes it. Now he was entitled to eat. He didn't have to fast, but the problem is it was wine. As soon as he takes the wine, he falls asleep. And he not only falls asleep, but he kind of models the story of, there's a story in the Gemara of Choni Mergel, the Choni, the circle drawer, and who was very powerful, actually, as long as he was awake. He could draw a circle, he could draw a magic circle, as is known in certain cultures. You remember the story in the second part of the Yazidi, the Gurdjieff talks about the story. They draw a circle, and in this case, in the Gemara, the
Yazidim.
yeah, how do you say?
Yazidim.
Yeah, the Yazidim, and who may still be in Iraq. And anyway, so Choni Mergel draws this circle, but one time he gets into this. He gets into a he has a meeting with somebody, and he winds up falling asleep, and he sleeps for 70 years. It's such a solid sleep. When he wakes up, he doesn't even know time has passed. And he encounters the grandson of the person who he was talking to before he fell asleep. I said, tell him, look, 70 years went. He thought he was talking to the same person, but he actually had been solidly asleep for 70 years. And so that's what happens here. There's a 70-year sleep, but the 70-year sleep represents the loss of access to the 70 faces of the Torah. Shivim Panim, the Torah. And it means that there can be a state of consciousness that is so sleepy that mochin are not there. There isn't a mind that is able to get guidance directly from the revelation of the Torah. And so what is meant to be the guide, if you have a certain level of emunah, and if you have the mentality to receive teaching from the Torah, then you can draw directly from the Torah. There's a way, in fact, that you could say the Torah itself is the Bat Melech. That the Torah, because the Torah is divine wisdom, the Torah is Chochmah, and that Chochmah in the book of Mishlei, then we see that Chochmah is what the Greeks called Sophia. The Torah itself is the Bat Melech. But because the seeker, because of the overpowering influence of fascination, as I think what we called it last time, becoming fascinated by things, and not having a deep enough stability, inner stability, because becoming fascinated, something diverts you because it looks so interesting, and don't really know how to stay focused on the object of the quest, to keep your eye on the prize. So you get allured or drawn after something that is superficial, but it captures all your attention. And when that becomes characteristic or overwhelmingly characteristic, then a person can become completely asleep. You're completely in that state. So, but the good news is that the princess doesn't give up. The princess doesn't give up, even if we fall completely asleep. The one that we are looking for is looking for us even more. And so while he's in this state of really deep sleep, he has no access to his mochin, and all these things are befalling him, although he's not conscious of anything that's happening. She comes by and weeps over him, sees him in this condition, and she's weeping over him and really feeling the sadness of the situation. And she leaves him a message. She leaves him a message on her kerchief, which she writes with her tears. And when he wakes up, he discovers it. So eventually, he wakes up again, comes to conscious state. He finds this kerchief and his servant, who represented the mind, who had gone into hiding these 70 years and wasn't able to really be helpful, comes back and tells him what happened. And he looks at and that she was by and gave him the kerchief. He looks at it, and he has to hold it up to the sun to be able to. It's like hidden writing, because what it is you could say it's the secret Torah. It's the secret Torah that gives him the directions now that he has to follow. He doesn't have access to the chitzoniut of the Torah. He doesn't have access to the exoteric levels of the Torah. So he can't directly go to the Torah, but he has a secret. He has the inner secret directions that come that the Bat Melech get left for him because of her great rachmanut that she has for him, because she so cares so much. Actually, is trying to help him awaken. So she tells him. She gives him this information that you've fallen so asleep you won't be able to find me anymore, where you used to find me. But if you will look for a golden mountain with a pearl castle, that's where you'll be able to find me. And that's where we're holding in this story. So I'm going to go to the...
Miles,
Yes.
there's one detail that I remember differently,
Okay.
and that's at the beginning with the king.
Mm-hmm.
The way I remember that you told it, he didn't expel her, he profaned her.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He
And she
sort
left.
of...
He got angry.
Yes, he got angry at her. He literally sort of curses her. It actually... yeah, and that's really really deep. Drives her out, drives her away. You know, on the surface, I'm remembering like Oscar Wilde had that. Says he had that poem. Each man, what is it? Each man kills the thing he loves, or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. And that's sort of like that's kind of like the inyan there that he. But I think what's deep to me is that how else he needed to create that space in order for the divine will really to be fulfilled.
But that suggests that it's conceivable that he did it on purpose in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, that he did it on purpose, but it's the only way, when there's that much love, the only way he could cause the separation was he'd have to say something harsh to her.
It's the easiest way to end a relationship.
So in a way it's a terrible thing, but it's probably an intentional in order to create conditions for something more ultimate to occur. That is in fact the way it's described in this story.
Don't you think too that in any relationship it reaches a point where something has to break in order for it to go to a higher level?
That might be what he has in mind. I mean, Reb Nahman has in mind in telling the story that way, that it's that to go to a higher level. So it also, I mean, it represents, maybe there's a stage you get to a point, let's say, inside in your own experience, where you get tired of what represents the divine or the holy to you, or the real, and you have to in a way drive it out. The Reb Nachman has this teaching, or this concept. It's very central to a lot of his teaching, that you do have to empty yourself out, and even though that is a very painful thing to go through every time, but if you don't get empty, you can't get filled again, and. But that relates to his teaching of the Madrigot, that things happen in stages, and you go step by step, but the only way you can get to the next step is by, in a way, losing the step that you have. So it can be something that could be like anything from writer's cramp to lack of inspiration. But sometimes you just notice that you're empty, and you could either get you could either sort of try to ignore it, to try to deny it, or you could really face it, and then you could use it consciously. That if you see that you're really empty and you know that through some kind of longing in that state that it's possible to receive something new. And that's very basic to Reb Nachman's path. That you find you have to include the emptiness as well as the fullness. And so this expandable, I mean, I always like the model of the expandable parts of Fim, that you become a bigger and bigger vessel, but the only way you can expand is by emptying out what you're already holding, and then in that openness or that emptiness, you can refill it with something. So. So we're up to the point where he receives the kerchief and he takes it and he raises up to the sun so he can see what's written on it, because it has really a big secret. He begins to see the letters and he can read what's written there, and it contains all of her complaint. Her complaint. It says she wants him to find her, and so all of that is included in the message. And the fact that she's no longer there in the fortress where he had seen her originally, but rather ki im shivakesh har shel zahav mibsar shel margoliot sham timsa eni. Says, but rather you have to go and look for this gold mountain and the pearl fortress. Mm-hmm. And v'hishich et ha-mesharet v'henicho v'halach levado levaksha. In order to find, he takes off to look for this golden mountain and for the pearl castle or fortress, but he goes without the servant. And we didn't mention it in going over the story again, but in the story itself, when the soul comes into the world, in order to find the princess and restore the princess to the king, the Sheni L'Malchut first says to God, says, okay, I want to go and find your daughter for you, and I'll go into the world of hiddenness and concealment just to find and restore your daughter to you, but I need three things. And one is I need a horse, I need a servant, and I need some money to operate with. And that, of course, that represents elements that characterize existence in this world. So when the soul comes into this world, it can't come in the way it is when it's beyond the world, when it's in the divine realm. But it has to take on a human structure. It has to have a human body, and it has to have the mentality of a human being. It has to have the level of consciousness of a human being. That's the servant. And the horse is the body, and it has to have chiyut. It has to have some fuel to run on. It has to have its expenses. What is the operating expenses for the body and the mind, and the kesef? So it comes in with these things, and in the course of its experience and its practice, it first. Has all three, and after the first stage, when it eats the apple, it proceeds after that without the horse. So it's on a deeper level. It proceeds just with the mind, which is represented by the servant. But now it's telling us that in order to really find the princess again. You can't go just with either the body or the mind, but it has to go on something that is deeper. in order to find the golden, you won't find. I mean, within the reach of the body and the mind, you can't find a gold mountain and a pearl castle. It's somewhere else. It's somewhere in a deeper place, and you have to go with the neshama alone. You have to go with the soul itself. And so he leaves he's leaving even the servant here. He goes by himself with his essence. He's going to look for the princess, and then it comes to the next stage of the journey. So maybe, I think we'll do this part of the story, then we'll go into what could be the meaning. What is this gold castle? What is the pearl, the gold mountain, the pearl castle? So he's going on in a more deeper search now. And v'halach kama shanim levaksha v'yishev atzmo. He went on it took quite a few years. He's seeking for the gold mountain, the pearl castle. And Nahman uses this language several times in this story, that whenever there's a turning point in the path, v'yishev atzmo, he resolved himself. It means he had to. It means that you come to some, would be the word in Hebrew, like hitlabtut. You're debating with yourself. You don't have clarity. Should I go this way? Should I do it? Do I believe it? In other words, there has to be sveikot, after some kind of doubts, some kind of lack of clarity has to enter into the situation. It's not totally simple and straightforward. So he's facing these complexities, but he always comes to a certain state of resolve, where he determines that is going to go on. So he comes to, when he's thinking it over, he's thinking this whole thing over, where am I going to find this gold mountain pearl castle? And after all the self-doubt, the questioning, the investigation, comes to a certain decision. He resolves, comes to the conclusion. Well, you know what? You're not going to find it in the populated world. You're not going to find it in the world of the social world. You'll never find a gold mountain or a pearl castle there. Ki hu baki b'mapat ha'olam. He had knowledge of he knew the whole layout of the whole world. V'alken, because he had this knowledge of the whole cosmos. Alken elech el hamidbariyot. But I have to go into the wilderness. I have to go into the place beyond where conventional life is. And so he's searching in the wilderness, in the depths. Wilderness, the midbariyot benachman, that usually means the tat-mada. This is in like the unconscious, in that he's going deep, deep, deep into regions of consciousness that are unexplored or undemarcated. So he's going deep into consciousness or into the unconscious for a long time. And finally, after all this search and deep within the unconscious, he comes upon something, a giant, an Adam Gadol, he sees this huge being. Why he has the image of the Adam Gadol, she'eno enushi klal. This is like not human at all. So some kind of superhuman being. She Adam Gadol kokach. I mean, this is beyond, and it has like a remes or an echo here of the notion of the shiur koma, the divine anthropos, who is huge, who is huge. It was to get a sort of sense of an image that represents the divine, which is just human-like in form, but just vaster than a person could possibly be. And he comes to this being. And what, not only is it huge, but Vinasa Ilan Gadol is carrying this huge tree. Should be Yeshuv Eno Nimsa Ilan Gadol Kazeh. I mean, in the conventional world, you can't find a tree that is so big as the tree. So this person, this being, is vast, way beyond the size of a person in this world, and is carrying this big tree that is huge. Ve'ota ha'isha aloto mi'ata v'yamar lo ani adam v'tama v'amar shezeh kol kach zman shani b'midbar v'lo ra'iti me'olam b'kan adam. Says a person is here. You have no idea how long I've been here, and it's the first time I see a human being comes to this place. וסיפר לו כל המעשה הנ"ל, שהוא מבקש הר של זהב ומבשר של מרגליות. So told this giant his whole story and what he's looking for. And the giant אמר לו, בוודאי, אינו בנמצא כלל. What are you talking about? There's no such thing. You're looking for something that doesn't exist. ודחה אותו ואמר לו שהסיעו את דעתו בדבר שטות, כי בוודאי אינו נמצא כלל, ואינו נמצא כלל. So when he meets this person, we get the image, he finally comes, he's exploring in a very deep place, doesn't know really where he is, and finally comes to something, and it's this huge giant carrying this big tree. He tells him the story, and the giant says, you're crazy. What are you looking for? Something? Somebody deceived you. They told you a story, and there isn't such a thing. So I'm going to go through this whole part, and then we'll go back and try to interpret it a little. He says it's just foolishness for you. So what does he do? So he starts crying. He falls into he's in tears. כי בוודאי בהכרח הוא נמצא באיזה מקום והוא דחה אותו, היינו האדם המשונה שבגע דחה אותו בדבריו ואמר כי בוודאי דבר שטות אמרו לפניו. So he starts, he's crying and he's insisting that it does have to exist. There must be what he's looking for. Of course, he has, by this time, he has this history. The whole story is that he's seen the princess. And that is such an important element because the way experience goes for those who are on the path is that you do have these visions, you do have epiphanies. There's giluyim occur, that we have these moments. They don't indicate the end of the story, but they do show us something. And he's had these big moments. He at least in the story 3 times, twice consciously he had a direction from the princess. And the 3rd time he has the kerchief with the message written in her own tears. And so he can't accept. He had enough experience that he can't accept that it isn't true. If she would tell him that she's in this gold mountain and pearl castle, how could it not be true? Since she left him the message written in her own tears. And so he's crying, and the giant is telling him that he's crazy. Ki b'vadai davar shtud amru lefanav, v'hu amar hainu hasheni l'malchut. And he answers, sheb'vadai yesh. He's very stubborn. He says, no, this definitely is the case. And Marlo Ledati Hishtut. And the giant says, no, as far as I'm concerned, it's just crazy. Ach mechmat shata mitakesh. Hine ani memune al kol hachayot. Selemancha ve'ekra lechol hachayot ki hem ratzim et kol ha'olam. So it says, as far as I'm concerned, this is all crazy, it's all nuts, but since you're so stubborn, the fact is that I'm in charge of all the animals, and for your sake, I'm going to call all the animals in the world because they're everywhere. They run throughout the whole world. So I'll call in the animals. They know where everything. Ulai tedach ad mehem mehar mitzar kanal. He says maybe one of them knows where is this mountain, where is this castle. V'karat kulam mikatan v'yad gadol kol minei chayot v'sha'al otam. So he called in all the animals of every type, and he asked them v'chulam eshivu shelo ra'u lo ra'u, but they all answered they had never seen such a thing. Via Marlo, so the giant says to the seeker, don't you see that this was crazy? What they told you? They told you the story. Im tishma shuv la'acharecha ki bevadai lo timsa ki einenu ba'olam. Says, if you have any sense, turn back, because you definitely aren't going to find this, find what you're looking for anywhere in the world. But the seeker was absolutely certain, he was sure that this has to exist. And Marlo, so the giant said, Hine b'midbar nimtza sham achi v'hu memuna al kol ha'ufot. So he says, okay, look, I have a brother, and if you go a little further, you'll come upon my brother, and my brother's in charge of all the birds. And v'ula yodim hem mechmat shehem porchim ba'avir b'gavo. Maybe the birds will know because they fly really high, and they could survey all that exists. So maybe the birds would be able to tell you where it is. Ulai ra'u har mitzar v'telech alav v'tomar lo shani shalachti otcha elav. So he says, let's go. You go further. You'll come to my brother, and just tell my brother that I sent you. V'halach kama v'chama shanim levav. So it took him many more years to find the brother. Matzah shuv adam gadol mod, and again he finds this huge giant. V'nasa gam ken ilan gadol, and he's also carrying this huge tree. V'sha'alta gam ken. So he asks him the same question. V'heshiv lo kol ha'ma'aseh she'achiv shalachu elav. He tells him his brother sent him. And this one, v'hu dachauto gam ken. He also says, forget it. Ki b'vaday no b'nimsa. There's enough. It's absolutely certain there's not such thing. V'hu yivtziroto gam ken. He keeps up the pressure on him that he should tell him where it is. V'yamar lo hine ani memumne al kol ha'ofod ekra otam ulai yodim hem v'kara kol ha'ofod v'sha'ot kulam mikatan v'yad gadol v'shivo she'enam yodim ma'ar mitzar. So it says, look, I'll call in all the birds that can survey the whole world, and maybe they'll tell you if they ever saw such a thing. Calls them all in, and they say, no, there's no such thing. Don't you see now that there isn't such a thing in the world? He says, look, if you only listen to me, you would go back and forget about this search, because you're never going to, there isn't anything like it. But he said, no, there definitely is in this world somewhere. And so the giant said, you can also, if you go further, you'll come to another brother, and he's in charge of all the winds. V'hem ratzim kol ha'olam ulai yodim hem. And winds go even faster beyond where the birds can go. Maybe the winds would be able to tell you. V'hem ratzim kol ha'olam ulai yodim hem v'halach kam v'chama shanim levakesh matzah adam gadol gam ken. Same thing comes finally after a long search, and he finds this giant carrying this huge tree, and asks him the same question. The giant says, he tells him the whole story. The giant v'dacha oto. I mean, he also just he tries to deflect him. V'hu ivtzir oto, but he won't give up. And so the third giant says, "Lemano yikra sheyavo kol haruchot v'yishaltem." He says, "Okay, for your sake, I'll call in all the winds." And he does. He calls them in. All the winds come. Asks them the question. V'lo yadu shum echad mehem mehar mivtzar. But none of them, not one wind, had any knowledge of such a mountain, such a castle. V'yamar lo halo ata roeh sheshtut sipru lefanecha. Don't you see how silly this story is? V'yitchil livkod ma'od. And he's just weeping, really weeping great, tremendous tears. V'amar ani yodea sheyeshno b'vaday. I'm absolutely certain that there is this mountain, this castle. B'toch kach ra'a sheba od ruach echad. And while this is going on and he's weeping, they saw that there's one more wind that is coming in. The giant who was in charge of the winds was angry at this wind. Madua nidacharet lavo. Alo gezarti sheyavo kol haruchot v'lama lo bata imahem. And what are you taking your time? Didn't I give the command all the winds should come in? And what are you? Now you're just straggling in. השיב לו, שנית עקבתי נחמד שהייתי צריך לשאת בת מלכה אל הר של זהב ומבצר של מרגליה. And so the wind said, I was delayed because I had to take this princess to a golden mountain and with a pearl castle. Okay, in Yiddish. The wind says, this late wind comes and says, ich hab mich versammelt, der macht mir sich bedarft abtrugen, aber als Melech zu ein gildenen Burg mit einem perlenden Schloss. Hat sich sehr gefreut. He's really happy. He heard that what the story is. Hat gefragt der Mamune, der Wind, was ist dort ein Teil? Hat ihm gesagt, so he asked the, let's see, who does the asking here? Der Sheni the Malchut, sehr gefreut, was hat schon solche gewesen, sie hören das, was will. Hat gefragt der Mamune, so the giant asked the wind, if this is a land, it's a golden mountain with a pearl castle, so what is precious there? Was ist dort ein Teil?
The giant asked that?
Yeah, the giant. This is, I mean, if the mountain is golden, the castle is pearl, so it's like, what do things cost over there? I mean, what is... hat ihm gesagt, dort ist all dem Teil. Everything there is really precious. Everything is very expensive over there. I'll go back to the Hebrew a little bit. Let's see. V'smach v'sha'al hamemune et haruach ma yakar sham v'amar lo shekol ha'dvarim hem sham biyoker gadol. Everything there is very expensive, or very dear, very precious. V'yamar hamemune al haruchot lehasheni l'malchut באשר שזה זמן גדול כל כך, שאתה מבקשה, וכמה יגיעות שהיו לך, since you've been searching for such a long time, and you've made such an effort, אולי יהיה לך אתה מניעה מחמת ממון. That maybe now you'd be held back because you won't have the resources. I mean, everything's very expensive over there. Remember, he's already left behind. He's left behind the horse. He's left behind the masharat, and now he can't go to this place where everything is so bioker. He can't go with the mammon that he was working on up till now. And so the giant, the third giant, Al ken ani noten lecha kli. Kishitoshit yadcha l'tocha t'kabel misham ma'od. I'm going to give you a wallet, a magic wallet, that anytime you need, all you have to do is put your hand in it, and you'll have whatever you need. You'll have all the, whatever you need, whatever money you need. V'gazar al ha'ruach hanal, shiyolich oto l'sham. The third giant who's in charge of the winds told this wind that it should take the seeker to that mountain. The storm wind came and lifted him up to that place. Ve'avioto el shar, v'ayu omdim sham chaylot shelo henicho lichnos el ha'ir. But the place was guarded by these soldiers, and they wouldn't let him into the city. Ve'hoshit yado el hakli v'lekach ma'od v'shicher otam. So he dipped into his magic wallet, and he bribed the guards, and then he was able to enter the city. V'haita ir na'a v'halach el gvir. And so he entered, and it was a beautiful city, and he v'halach el gvir v'sachar lo Mazonot. He went to a very wealthy person, and he got some nourishment, some food. Ki tzarich lishot sham, because he would have to stay there. Ki tzarich lisum sechel v'chachma lahotzia, because he would have to really develop his sechel and chachma. He'd have to have a lot of wisdom in order to be able to get the princess out of there. Ve'ech shehotzia lo sipir ubesof hotzia. But how he actually managed to free the princess from there, the Rebbe didn't tell. But at the end, at last, at the end, he did manage to release her from that. That's the end. That's where Reb Nahman ended the story.
It's like one of those stories where they write for children, where the children have to make up the ending of the story.
But in this case, we're supposed to live the end.
Yeah, that's great.
So that basically, the end of the story is that it has an end, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But I can assure you there is an end, that there is a way that you could get the princess released. You could release the princess from the gold mountain and from the pearl castle. So of course we want to know something more than just that. But that's like, you could say, on the initial level, it's kind of like saying, as you can see in this story, but from the akshanura, the stubbornness of the seeker, that no matter what even wondrous being he encounters, who appears to have great knowledge or have a vantage point to know about these things, and even if such a consciousness tells him that it's not to be found, he will never give up. He'll never give up on the search. So, on one level, it's easy to see that it's a story about emunah, that it has to do something in ability to believe in something when there's no evidence for it, and even when there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, that he's not going to be he's not going to be deterred, and partly that is because of the gifts of the path, which are those moments when something is revealed to us. And I often think that we should record these. Everybody should have like a little journal where you write down the incredible things, the revelations that occur, which don't occur every single day. But the thing is, if you can remember them, they're very precious. They're very, very precious. And when you have a period, when you're in the period of where emunah is required, because there's nothing coming through that is illuminating and strengthening you, then when you recall, as Reb Nahman is always talking about the zikaron, that you cultivate your memory, that you can remember those moments of great clarity, then they're keys. They're very energizing. They're maybe even a big part of the secret of the infinite wealth that he has in the magic kli, in this magic wallet. Those are things that are sort of inexhaustible. And it's clear that one of the things he's saying is that wherever the princess really is, we'll try to look at that also in a second. What kind of clues is Reb Nachman giving here? But wherever the princess is, it takes tremendous ashirut. You have a tremendous wealth of a certain kind in order to find her. And in fact, that will be the theme. There's a teaching, Likutei Moharan, which is the commentary on this story, and it's all about that, the kind of wealth that a person needs in order to be able to really operate in such a way as to be able to find and to release the princess. So that's one level. But so I want to go back at questions would obviously arise. What is he doing meeting these giants and with these big trees? And it would seem that each of these giants represents the Adam of a particular world. So that means that once he leaves the exploration which involves the body and the rational mind, he's going deep into the unconscious, then he starts to gain access to the olamot, to the higher worlds, to the inner worlds, and that each world is represented in the Zohar by an Adam. Let's say, when you take the 10 Sfirot, and every world is a configuration of 10 Sfirot, then there's two primary images that represent the 10 Sfirot, and as such you could say every world is represented by these two images, namely by the Adam and by the Elyn, the tree of life, the Eitz Chaim. Every world is a tree, and every world is an Adam. The array of the Sfirot in each world it can be understood through the symbol of the tree, and it can also be understood through the symbol of the human form. And so the array of the Sfirot is the configuration of consciousness, the angelic consciousness that is representative of one of the deeper worlds, is modeled here by the Adam Gadol that he comes in contact with. Once he finds that Adam Gadol, means that he's finding himself in a particular world, and he starts out with the Memuneh for the world of Asiya. That is the one who's in charge of all the Chayot. Because the Chayot are traveling on the surface. And that's one level of the symbolism of that, why he's the Memuneh l'chol hachayot, to everything that lives that is on the lowest world, that's on the bottom. And you see that each one of them represents something that is higher. So he goes from Chayot to Ofot to Chot. The second world, after he comes to the first angelic representative of the world, or the consciousness of the first inner world, where he's deflected, as is the case in every world, because in here, if you're thinking like in terms of the material that Reb Nahman is using, I'm sure that he has in mind the model of the Hechalot.
That
Hechalot, the palace of in early Jewish, the earliest form of Jewish mysticism has to do with soul ascents through the seven heavens, and getting and then going through palaces, in order at the end of which, in the highest world or in the end of the seventh heaven, there are a series of palaces that the Yored Merkavas, the one who rides or descends to the chariot, has to go through, and at the end of that they come to a beatific vision, where they see the Istaklut b'melech biyofio. They able to see the king in his beauty. That beatific vision is described, in which is based on the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel. But what is characteristic in that mysticism is that every stage is guarded, is difficult to get into. There has to be, every time you're going to come to something that is a higher step, there is going to be a guard there that is going to make it tough for you to get in.
And it gets worse and worse.
It gets harder and harder.
Demon angels.
Mm-hmm. And so so they have two sides, and the first thing they do, it's kind of like, just thinking now, the association, if somebody comes traditionally in Yiddishkeit, if they want to become Jewish, then the first thing that a rabbi is supposed to do is dissuade them. And then, you sure you want to do this? It's all the reasons no. And then they have to keep urging, and this was the model here. If you want to get into the inner chamber, the first thing you come upon is the Shomrim v'Shotrim, and they do everything they can to keep you out. And you have to have such depth, so every time he comes, he's weeping. He comes in and he's bocher, because which is the purification of the heart, and that is the ticket to getting in. And once he exposes the vulnerability, and the truthfulness, the truth of what's in his heart, then the shomer and shoter turns around and becomes a welcomer, and he says, "Okay, I did everything I can. I did my best to keep you out, but since you absolutely insist on coming in, here's the ticket to the next world." And says, you'll go and you'll come to I have a brother there who looks just like me, and the same thing happens. And it's at each stage to enter a higher world. There's a guard that first is trying to keep him out. And that goes on, the motif, all the way till the end. When it gets to the place where she really can be released from, it's guarded by these soldiers. And he has to bribe those soldiers to get in there with his infinite wealth. And that infinite wealth, so I'm going to look into that a little bit by looking at, there's a teaching in Likutei Moharan that I want to share also, which deals in a little bit, in an interesting way with that. So he has to weep and gain entrance into each higher world. So he goes, second world, he gets beyond the world of the Chayot, the second world, the world of the birds. The world of the birds is the world of Yetzirah, which is a higher. So it's a higher world, and it's more. The frequency is more refined. It's energy of the wings of the birds, the energy of birds. It's a much more, this is a deeper place, but he can't, the same basic drama goes through there, but he can't find the Bat Melech there. In fact, he can't find her in any of the worlds. The third world that he comes to with the winds would obviously be Olam HaBriya, comes to Briya. And he should actually be able to find her in Briya, because that is, according to the Kabbalistic myth, which this whole story is based on, or the teachings from the Kabbalah, when the Shvirat HaKelim occurs, then there's a fall from Olam HaAtzilut to Olam HaBriya. So that's where Malchut, which is the princess, ought to be accessible, but because he fell asleep and he doesn't have access to the Shivim Panim, the Torah, he can't find the divinity within the higher worlds even. Because that would be within the range of the Torah, could have revealed the Bat Melech in those worlds, but what Reb Nachman is trying to get to in this story, which he makes clear in other places, and it's in the introduction to the collection of the stories that Reb Nassan wrote, is that these stories are intended for a condition where people can no longer be moved directly through the conventional homiletical Torah methods. But they need to, we need to be reached, we need to have access to what he calls Torah Atik, the Torah of Atik Yomin, the Torah that is, it's beyond the Tzimtzum. There's a Torah that is so high, it hasn't, the Torah that's been squeezed into the worlds that we have knowledge of, can, under certain circumstances, lose its power. And when that happens, people are left without guidance, without divine guidance, unless they can have access, unless you can open up a flow from a higher source, from even a higher source, because it's not the case that all the Torah that exists, that the Torah and it's the Torah Kedumah, so the primordial Torah, is inexhaustible. And it's a Torah that is infinite. And it's the Torah from the place where the Neshama itself comes from that divine realm where divinity is whole, and only a little piece of it was squeezed into this world, Achrei Tzimtzum, only a little piece of it. And what happens, but after a long period of history, is that the vitality of that Torah that was squeezed into this world dries up. It's a very important inyan of dryness, of the need to be mechadesh, to be able to renew yourself, and to be able to renew the Torah that's in this world. This is why, for Nahman, one of the keys to his chassidut is that he wanted his chassidim to have chidushim. He wanted them to have their own interpretations, to find new meaning in the Torah. And he encouraged them to do that. And that's sort of an amazing thing, because a lot of chassidut became very, especially in the last 100 or more years, has become more and more restrictive. And here Nachman's, you could say, one of his key principles is that precisely what we need is not to close it up and be tight conservatives about it, to be the traditionalists as such. What we need to be is the renewers. We need to draw down from the Torah of Atik, which never was in this world yet. We need the world needs an infusion of fresh Torah. Ru?
It occurs to me that he had the best tool possible, which he didn't pay a whole lot of attention to, which was the 70 years sleep and the actual wiping away of all the panim. And that was a real tool. Instead of using that, he got up and shoved through and pushed some more with as much of the other outward-looking things that he could find, even though some of them were being stripped from him.
Mm-hmm.
The horse and so on were being stripped. It interests me that that happened in the world of the mind, and that here we are now stuck in Olam Habariya. Again, on another level, though, on a higher level. But here, he has to make the choice now to give up all that stuff, including the purse, really, and go to the place where there are no longer any panim of the Torah at all. And that will be, I think, the only way that he can bring what was the kelim that were broken and move down into Olam Habariya, back up to where they belong in Olam Ha'atzilut, it seems. But that's so easy to talk about, and so nowhere to find a place to be inside oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's going to have to give up the purse too. I mean, he's going to have to give up all the things and go back to the nothingness which he was shown, actually,
Mm-hmm.
which seems to me he was shown some of the sparks in that 70 years of sleep.
Mm-hmm. I like the direction you were going, and that's really a nice, good chiddush to bring in. It goes nice chiddush. I might just take it a little bit different direction. And that would be to say that the 70 years of sleep prepared him for the next stage. That wiped out these
true.
panim, and created this space where he could be in a position to pursue the Torah of Atik. And that's represented to some extent by the fact that he has to go beyond the worlds, because it's not even, so to speak, it's not even trickling down into, it's not in Bria, can't find her in Bria, can't find her in Yetzirah, can't find her in Asiya. He has to go beyond that, and what gets him to the place where he can find her, which is what Reb Nahman says, he got to the place where he could find her. He does get her out, but we don't know, he doesn't tell us the details of that, but he told us he does get to where she really is, where she told him she is. And the way he gets there is through this the most remote of all the winds. And that wind, I would say, is probably the what's the verse? Kol Demama Daka. It's the Kol Demama Daka. It's the really, 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 really. It's the sound that you just barely can hear. You know, it's the quietest sound. It's the deepest vibration. You know, that's you had to get to that place, to the innermost place. And that's the energy that could take him to this, to the Golden Mountain and the Pearl Castle.
What bothers me about that is that it's referred to as a ruach se'ara, and that clashes kind of.
It does, yeah, it does. It does. And I think, and it does. Now I'll take a crack at it. But I think that because the ruach se'ara is from the first parak of Yechezkel, and it is the toughest of the klipot. That's identified. The ruach se'ara is a really the storm wind. So that's the protective. That's what he has to ride ultimately.
What do you mean by toughest klipa in this case?
It would probably be the ultimate barrier. So it would be like what Michael was saying before, that it gets the barriers get actually stronger. The closer you get to the payoff, the stronger what is protecting it is. But at this point, he's able to ride that klipa so that instead of
There's another piece here, that he gets to a point where he can't do anything, but the divine powers are the doer.
Carry him, and the klipa itself is carrying him. Even which is represents the deepest concealing force itself, becomes an agency that is that carries him to the place where he can find and release the princess. But it seems to me at the end of the story, the imagery in the story, the Har Zahav comes from the book of Job, chapter 28, is most of the imagery that he has there, which includes that verse, Chachma me'ayin timatzeh. And if you go, where can you find Chachma? Where Chachma, of course, is the Bat Melech.
Right after it says, not in the deepest places you can go to, not in the abysses of the minds where precious things are found.
Most that's pretty clear. That's what he had. He had that chapter in mind when he was creating the imagery for the end of the story. But the thing is, at the end of the story, he has the resources to get her out, and we don't know how he got her out. But what the Rebbe is saying is that it would take a lot of sechel, and it takes infinite ashirut, infinite wealth. You have to have inexhaustible wealth, and you have to have tremendous intelligence, tremendous kind of intelligence in order to do it. It wouldn't be simple. Still wouldn't be simple. But he has what it takes to get her out. And he certainly knows where she can be found. So I think I want to just connect it. I want to connect to two things. Maybe in the time that we have left, I want to connect to two things as far as where we can go with this shir. And first of all, I want to connect it to just the beginning of Torah Samech in the first part of Likutei Moharan. In this Torah, Reb Nahman is opening up the meaning of the story. He gave this Torah a few months after he told the story, and it is this whole Torah is actually a commentary on the Idra Rabbah, a very deep section of the Zohar. And the reason he's talking about the Idra Rabbah here is because the Idra Rabbah represents in the Zohar the Torah of Atik, of that level. So it's the Zohar has the Zohar itself has an exoteric and an esoteric dimension, and the exoteric parts of the Zohar are most of the Zohar, which gives teachings concerning Sfirot. And then there are these special sections called the Idra Rabbah, the Idra Zuta, Sifra Tzniuta, and a couple other short sections which contain the sod of the sod. They say the inner meaning of the Zohar, the esoteric part of the esoteric part. And that's the Idra Rabbah is one of the main sections where Shimon Bar Yochai gives the deeper Torah, the inside meaning, the inner Kabbalah, and that's the teaching of the Partzufim. And in the Idra Rabbah specifically, it deals with the Partzufim that are in the middle pillar. So it's dealing with the flow that comes from Atik through Zeir Anpin to Nukba, and doesn't deal with Abba Ve'ima. which is in the Idra but it just deals with the flow coming from the highest Partsuf and how it comes down, and all the tikkunim of Atik and Archan Pin and Tikkunei Hazakan, that the tikkunim dealing with the flows that comes down through the highest Partsuf. A Partsuf really means a face, and that's the way these hypostases are represented, the divine hypostases in the Torah of the Partsufim, as these faces. And the highest face is the face of Atik Yomin, who has this beautiful white beard. And so that very precious energy,
Bring it on.
you have it, oh, yeah, so that's, is it David Friedman? Mm-hmm. The Partsufim?
Need to explain it?
This has actually all.
It's
This
the
looks like it has Albanim as well.
Yeah.
But here, this would be the Partsuf we're talking about. That is the highest channel of divine light, and the beard represents different flows, and if you look in the Idra Rabbah tells you exactly what the parts of the beard are and what they connect to and so forth. We could pass around. This is all the parts of Feen.
Was that beard being depicted as going in two directions?
It really has to do. I don't want to get too technical.
Okay,
with all
no, I
this
was just
stuff,
wondering
but
about the picture, so.
Yeah, the picture isn't like precise.
Yeah, I want to hear the text.
In Alpia text, but. So the point is that the Torah that goes with the interpretation, the commentary, the story is a Torah that is supposed to be a commentary on the Idra Rabbah, but when Reb Nachman does these kinds of things, it's all very brought down, as is typical of Chassidut, meaning he's not going to talk a lot of the technical details. You'd have to go to the Idra Rabbah itself. But he's talking about what it means, and so he cites the text from the Idra Rabbah, which I think, in the interest of time, I don't think well, maybe I will just read it because this is very powerful. And this is the way he says. So Torah Samach, it's called Patach Rabbi Shimon, and he starts out Idra Rabbah Kedisha. Patach Rabbi Shimon V'Amar. It's called the Torah is called Patach. Rabbi Shimon started. He began because that's the way the text in the Zohar goes. And so Patach Rabbi Shimon V'Amar Eit Lasot Lashem. It's commenting on the verse. It's time to do something for Hashem. Zohar says Amai Eit Lasot Lashem. Why is it a time to do something for Hashem? Mishum de Heferu Toratecha. Is that they set aside your Torah. What does that mean? Torah de la'ela means the higher Torah. The ihi mitbatla. Ila yitavid b'tikkun hadad. It would be cancelled out if we don't do this tikkun. Ula atik yomin itmar. This is said. This is being said to Atik Yomin. It's written, Ashrecha Yisrael Micha Mocha. We have a verse that says, Israel, you're really so lucky. Who's like you? Uchtiv Micha Mocha Be'elim Hashem. And so we also have a verse, who could be compared among the mighty to Hashem. Karal Rabbi Elazar Berei Odve Kame. So Reb Shimon called his son, and he told him to sit right in front of him. He positioned him in a certain place. Well, the Rabbi Abba Misutra Achara, and he told Rabbi Abba to sit opposite his son, Rabbi Eliezer. V'yamar Anan Klala Dekul. He said, now we are the totality of everything. We embody everything. Ad Kan Itaknu Kayamin. To this point, this tikkun was done. Each tikkun, they all were quiet. Shema'u kala, and then they heard a voice. V'arkubatan dalada nakshan. Their knees were knocking together. They heard this heavenly voice, and they're all trembling. My kala, what is this voice? Kala de kanufia ila'a demit kanfe. It's, the heavenly hosts are gathering together. Why are they gathering together? Because they're going to hear this Torah that's coming from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Torah that's going to come from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is the Idra Rabbah, is actually fixing the world, is changing the nature of the cosmos. So that when it's coming through, Reb Shimon, and then he goes into a whole thing about how he doesn't know if he should say it or he shouldn't say it, and does he have permission to say it, because it's not just empty words, it's the words of such incredible power that even the angels and the heavenly hosts are going to come to listen. That's the passage that Rav Nahman cites, and then this is what he says. Here's his teaching. He says, Da sheyesh shvilei Torah sheyesh b'hem hitbonenut gadol ma'od. There are pathways in the Torah that require the deepest contemplation. But you can't possibly achieve such a deep depth of contemplation unless you're very wealthy. When it comes to the simple levels of Torah, we have a teaching that says if you don't have flour, you can't have Torah. If you don't have you gotta have some kind of resources. You can't whatever. So, like for simple Torah, all you need is kemach. Al kol panim parnasa. You have to have at least some kind of parnasa. When it comes to the depth, this kind of depth, shehu gadol ma'od, to contemplate on such a deep level, you could bring in such a high Torah, which is what's necessary to fix the world. You have to have this virtually unlimited wealth. You have to have all the wealth of the entire world. That's the way he starts the teaching. And you could ask a lot of questions about this wealth, but I want to share with you another place which is a key to this. Just for now, in the second part of the Kuti Moran in Torah Mem, which is in its own right an interesting teaching, but he refers to at the end of this teaching in Torah Mem what he calls Shefa Kfula, Bechinat Shefa Kfula. What is Shefa? The divine flow, a double measure of the divine flow. Everything that exists is empowered, is energized by what is called Shefa, which in this case technically means that's the divine energy that is flowing down through everything that exists and allowing it to be whatever it is. And everything has a certain measure of this Shefa that is appropriate to its level. And then there's something called doubles. You could get a double Shefa. And that's the key. This double Shefa, what he's calling here Shefa Kfula, this is the key to the Ashirut, the wealth that a person needs in order to be able to do the Hitbonenu, to be able to contemplate, to have the depth that is necessary in order to receive and draw down the Torah of Atik, the Torah that could heal the world. So I'll just give you like a little taste of what he's saying in this teaching, which is too long to do the whole thing, but I might be able to get just a taste of it. It starts out, Mishi yodeh me'eretz Yisrael, sheta'am be'emet ta'am eretz Yisrael, hu yachol lahakir ba'acher, im haya etzot tzadik al Rosh Hashanah im lav. That sounds pretty, if you follow the Hebrew, he's saying that whoever really knows the land of Israel, who's had the taste of the land of Israel, would be able to recognize in somebody else whether that person had been with the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah or not. That's what he says. V'imoto tzadiku gadol b'malu katana. You could tell what kind of Rebbe they were with. If they were with the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah. Now, the inyan of to be with the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah is for Reb Nahman. He said that's the whole thing with me. That's what I'm all about. Rosh Hashanah is my thing. I want all my Hasidim to be with me on Rosh Hashanah. But you have to understand, like, what Rosh Hashanah is the new cycle, is the chidush of the world. It's the whole world is being renewed. At that time, it's when the old cycle is finished, and it's just at that moment when something new can come in, and so it's the best possible time if you're in that kind of a relationship with someone who has the shefa kfula, or has the asherut, if that has that kind of wealth, that they can hold the space for the Torah Atik on some level, then to be with them at that time, that's what he's talking about here. If you could be with them at that time, it's very, very special. And he's teaching, he's saying, and it's like Tam Eretz Yisrael. If you knew what you really could taste Eretz Yisrael, then you could tell. You could tell because they have, whoever was there at that moment has the flavor of Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to see if I can find that what he's saying is he says that the specialness, what he's trying to say about Eretz Yisrael is that in principle it's defined as the place which the divine eyes are always on. This God is always looking at Eretz Yisrael. Mm-hmm. And so there is a certain hitparut there, that there's a certain, it's a place where, if it's the way it should be, which isn't always the case, but it's the place where, if it's as it should be, there's a healing to that rent and divinity. You know, because there's a teaching, the Midrash says that God says, I won't enter into the upper Yerushalayim until I enter into the lower Yerushalayim. And so, if that's the place where everything can be aligned, which is the axis mundi, and the divine eye, so the divine eye is always focused on there, that it should be in a certain way, it should have a certain healing, it should be all put together, and if it really is, then it produces this hitparut. There's a kind of a divine pleasure, a divine pride, even a divine that God is gets nachas from looking at Eretz Yisrael, and but the thing is that, let me see where he says that. He says, "Aval mi hu zeh sheyuchal lirod et Hashem yitbarach," that who could really see the eye that is looking, sheyuchal lirod hitparuto yitbarach, that can really see the divine nachas. Omnam mishu ro'eh hatzadik ha'amet shehu mekarev bnei adam levod eto yitbarach. If somebody could see a Rebbe in action, is what he's talking about, like on Rosh Hashanah. Shu mekarev bnei adam levod eto yitbarach, that is able to connect people to Hashem. V'hu ikar hitkarvut Yisrael avihem shebashamayim, is connecting the people to Hashem. Nimsa shu ba'atzmo hitparut shemitparer Hashem yitbarach ba'amo. Then that person is able to link this world up, the people in this world up with the divine source, is the hitparut, is himself or herself that hitparut. Ki al yado kol hitkarvut hitparut, is that's how everything comes together. So what he comes out looking for the place where he says that when a person is able to do this, yeah, it says here, Azayu gam ken mikabel min hitparut. So when somebody is present, when this connection is being made, Azai mishu mistakel bemet bezer tzadik amiti, when the person is doing this, Azai hu gam ken mikabel min hitparut azot. If someone is there with the person who is holding the space of the Torah of Atik and is connecting this world to that which is even beyond this world, and the people that are with in that kibbutz of in that sangha are there together, then whoever witnesses that, Azayu gamken mekabel mina hitparut, gets a contact eye. They also become part of the experience of the tzaddik who's holding the space. And they're also like, they become just like the tefillin which connect the mind to the divine, and are called pe'er, the glory of God. So that person's eyes also become the divine eyes. They can see with God's eyes. And then you have the eyes of the divine eyes. It means wherever you look, you see Eretz Yisrael. So anywhere that you look, that will be Eretz Yisrael. That's what, when it says that the atmosphere of Eretz Yisrael draws Chochmah into the world. Is that the person who is connected with the experience of one who is causing or participating in the unification of above and below, gains that same consciousness of the deep connection, and then they see it wherever they look, they will see the land of Israel, the place that the divine eye is always watching. Because what the wisdom of the atmosphere there is due to the fact of the divine gaze, that comes from the nachas that God gets when we're consciously connected. And then, so he goes through, has a lot of sort of midrashic ways that he develops this more. Then at the end of the teaching he says, V'yesh b'zeh od inyanim. There's more to this, because we have in the midrash it says, Ein adam met v'chatzi tavato biyado. I mean, so nobody completes their life having fulfilled even half of their desires. And every mortal person, when they leave this world, there's a lot of things that they wished for that they didn't get. They didn't get even half of it. The person that whatever resources they have, you can't get everything that you really, really want. There's always something more, something lacking. Aval, yesh bechinat shefa kefula. But there's such a thing as a double-strength shefa. V'chesev to'afot lach. There's a verse in Eov that there's a really that you have a really powerful currency, and shehu l'shon kaful. The to'afot there, it means a double measure. You have a double measure. Nimsa shebezeh shefa nitma le'ritzana me'echa shehi kfula. that if you have this kind of shefa, that then you overcome the condition of being in a state of being bereft of half of your desires. That you have, if you have this shefa, then you have everything. You have everything that you could possibly want.
In which you can see the Bat Melech in every situation, including the bad roads.
And that's that's the Ashurut. It says that's what it takes to free the Bat Melech. You have to have this shefa kfula. To have the shefa kfula, you have to be tam Eretz Yisrael. You have to have a taste. You have to be able to taste what Eretz Yisrael really is. And you get that taste if you can experience with somebody the connection to the ultimate, that you yourself can see the way God is seeing. And when you see that way, then wherever you look, that you will see Eretz Yisrael. Wherever you are will be Eretz Yisrael. And may it be so. Ken Yhi Ratzon.
Yeah, Ken Yhi Ratzon. Ooh, wow. Yasher Koach. Toda Rabbah. Wow.
Aye, 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 mekom kevodo. So I want to bless us all that we should be so stubborn that we just don't take no for any answer. And we should just keep going. We have to keep going until we are able to run on the energy of the Shefa Kafula. I mean, that kind of divine energy, that which is there for us to receive, if only we're stubborn enough to not accept less. And may we have the merit to taste the taste, the flavor of Eretz Yisrael, and to know that taste so well that we'll be able to see with our own eyes what it is that the divine eye is so pleased by. And may we have the joy of the divine in each of our own hearts, and bring down that Torah, that Torah from beyond, the tzimtzum that can refresh this world and cause it to be renewed. V'nomar.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Did you say that the Sheva Kfula is great?